Remember searching singlemuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by singlemuslim.com. I'm Fahima Mohammed and I am so happy to present tonight's show again, and I look forward to hearing from all of you watching live here on Sky tonight on Sky Channel 752 and wherever else you're streaming from, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I want to welcome all of you, as well as from the British Muslim team. I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate your support. And I also would like to invite you to our conversation tonight. It would be an absolute pleasure to hear some of your voices live on the screen today with any of your comments, queries, or questions for myself or my guest tonight. And that number that you can call in order to ask any of your questions is 01924 231 083. Do you remember that national network rates do apply? So please do ask the bill payer's permission before calling in. If you want to call anonymously or message us, for any sort of questions and queries as well, you can do so for free on our WhatsApp service. And that number is 07585 835 150. And I just want to say again that I want to thank you all for tuning in. It's an absolute pleasure to be hosting this amazing program. We have so much to talk about tonight. And the topic that we're going to be discussing is identifying the red flags in relationships. This is a really hot topic. A lot of us, talk about these red flags in sort of like gist, but we're going to go into it from professionals, from an amazing guest all the way from Nigeria. We're here today with Khadija Ibrahim. Assalamu alaikum, Khadija. How are you?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good evening, Fahima. So pleasure being here.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a few days now, and I'm so happy to see you. I really appreciate your time, and you're streaming from across the globe. How exciting. And we have an amazing guest for you tonight. All of you that's watching, I want to remind you that Khadija here, she is a life coach. She's a marriage counselor. She's also an author for a few books that she's written regarding relationships. So we have a real treat for you tonight. Make sure you do tune in and call in with any of your WhatsApp questions as well, and we're happy to answer any of your queries. So, Khadija, when it comes to red flags, maybe a lot of us use that terminology, but can you maybe describe to some of us to have a real clarity what is actually a red flag, especially when we're talking about relationships?
Thank you, Fahima. When we're talking about red flags in a relationship, these are some behaviors or some patterns that you may notice in a partner or in somebody who is willing to be a spouse. And these may be things that you may not be willing to go ahead in a relationship with. For instance, just as it says red flags in a relationship, if you've played a game before or you've watched some soccer or something, some other games probably, you've seen where a red flag is shown. It means that you have to stop or you have to pause. Or at that moment, you need to stop exactly what you're doing at that moment. So the same goes on here. Psychologists define red flags in a relationship as something that you notice in a spouse to be or in your spouse that maybe you may be needing to pause or stop in that relationship. Usually, these are signs that are usually ignored or taken for granted.
That is so true. It's really interesting that you say that, because a lot of us, when we're actually entering into getting to know somebody for a relationship or potential partner, a potential spouse in the future, we do show up in the best way, which is obviously, something that we need to do. We need to bring our best foot forward. We need to say the right things, do the right things. So we don't really get to see and know that person unless we have a bit of time. But even over time, unless that person really does commit in that relationship, like they say, you don't know someone unless you really have maybe traveled with them or, spent, more time with them. But the thing is, we're here to highlight that without doing that, there are certain patterns and behaviors, like Khadija has mentioned, that can come up for you when you recognize this in the other person. And these are red flags that actually are kind of alarm bells, so that you can actually think twice as to, is that person's words meeting their action, for example, or is there something that is going on behind the front? So that's why it's really interesting that we do have this topic tonight. And I love the fact that you've said what you've said so far, Khadija. Do you think it's slightly different with the red flags for men and women?
Yes, exactly, Fahima. Thank you for emphasizing that. I would like to also add that these red flags are often there in a relationship, usually before you go serious, because this is an Islamic channel. I'll also like to add that when you're courting in a relationship or before marriage, you may need to have some time where you get to understand your spouse to be, or you get to understand the relationship, because that would probably be a lifetime investment. So there may be questions that you may be asking yourself, like, what are you watching out for? Like, what are the things that you will require in a relationship? Like, who is it that you're dealing with? And this will go both ways. It doesn't matter if it's a male or a female. It will go both ways. So this could be found in any of the genders, so to say. So what are you looking out for in a relationship? What are those things that you could see in the person's patterns of behavior that maybe you may want to sit down and watch out for, like, okay, what's going on behind the scenes? Usually you may need some time to actually sit down or get to know that person better before you would be able to jump into conclusions or things like that.
Tell me some of the examples of these red flags, Khadija, so we can have a little bit more in-depth analysis of what does this actually mean.
Thank you, Fahima. So I would like to give a proper example or definition to this, because somebody out there may just be thinking, like, how can I identify some red flags? And what's she talking about? Okay, so these are some certain questions that you may like to sit and ask yourself. If you are in a relationship right now and you're probably hoping that leads to marriage, these are some certain questions for you to be able to identify if there are red flags in that relationship. First is, are you being yourself when you're around your partner or your partner to be or your spouse to be? Are you being yourself? Or do you have to show up a face? Do you have to be so composed? Or do you have to be like the person or what the person wants you to be like? Or are you just being yourself? Are you so free and comfortable? Are you able to express yourself openly and freely? Are you able to communicate with that person? What level of communication would you say you have on a scale of 0 to 10? Another thing is, do you share the same dreams? Do you talk about the future? Are you able to see yourself in the person's life? Does your conversation hold around the future, what you're going to have, happiness, your dreams, your goals? Do you hold such conversations? Another thing is, are you able to admit your flaws? Is he also or is she also able to admit her flaws when they have offended you, or when you're trying to have a misunderstanding? Are you able to express yourself? Are you able to use some good words or magic words? How fluent is your conversation? Are you able to treat yourself with empathy and compassion? Are you able to share the love, or does it feel one-sided? Do you feel manipulated? Do you feel like or like you're being suppressed? Do you feel like somebody is making you do what you're not wanting to do at any moment? These are some things that you may want to watch out for. Another thing is, does that person appreciate who you are, or at the level that you are? Are you just being human with that person? Does the person appreciate you, or does the person want you to be something or someone that you are not, or somebody that you have not accepted yourself to be? What's your level of acceptance? What's your self-worth? Do you have some level of self-esteem when you are around that person, or do you have to always make sacrifices or make compromises, or do you have to feel like you're walking on eggshells? How comfortable are you genuinely around this person? So these are some certain questions that you would like to ask yourself, and even more.
Those are really interesting questions, and there's a really good thought-provoking sort of ways of dealing with your partner. My question to you, Khadija, is, do you think that when you're getting to know somebody, is there like some sort of timeline? Is there some sort of timeline as to whether or not you need to spend with that person in conversation, or do you need to put yourself in different scenarios? Because a lot of people, like I said at the beginning, when they are actually getting to know somebody at the beginning, they're obviously going to bring their perfect self. They're going to show themselves to be in the best way. So, you know, how do you actually try to identify the red flags early on, say before marriage? We'll go into it after marriage, after the break, but just quickly before we get into the next break, is it something that we need to think about, you know, in a short space of time? Is there something that we can catch on straight away? Because, you know, early conversations, everyone's just talking in the best way. What's your thoughts on that?
I love your question, Fahima. And I would like to add that and admit that usually at the beginning of every relationship, there's usually these butterflies. We're so excited. We want to put our best foot forward, just as you've mentioned. And we just want to love and give it and take all of it. But then one thing is there's no time limit to say, okay, after 3 months, you should be at this level. Everybody has a different way they go about their relationship. And there is no time limit per se to saying, okay, after 1 year, you should have been on so level. No, it really doesn't work that way. I think it's an individual thing, or the way you choose to work with your spouse, or the level of conversation or communication how you are able to interact with. So there is no one way, and there is no perfect relationship. So I would just like to add that you have to be able to express yourself and have open communication. And if you need assistance, you may want to see a marriage coach. That if you're taking it to another level, you want to settle down, or you want to be a long-lasting relationship.
Definitely.
Yes.
I love what you said. And, you know, seeking obviously help for this is definitely a must. We are going to go back into this conversation after the break. Please do stay tuned. I have so many more questions for you, Khadija, and you're really going into it quite deeply. So I'm really excited to come back and share more thoughts. I hope to see you after the break. Stay tuned, and inshallah, we'll see you soon.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live. With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum, and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I'm here talking to my lovely guest all the way from Nigeria on the red flags in relationships. We do have, Khadija, before we continue with our conversation, we do actually have a question or a comment on WhatsApp. Let me just get through this so I can actually ask you what exactly is your thoughts on this. It says, Assalamu alaikum to Fahima and Khadija. My top tips on spotting red flags in relationships and how to make right marriage choices would be to ask yourself, do you want to be with them? Okay, that was one of the actual queries. And you cannot force the marriage or force yourself to be with them. One red flag is disrespect. If your partner don't listen to you or change their behavior too much, it could mean that they are being rude. Okay, a question for Khadija. Do you like your name, Khadija?
My name's
And
Khadija.
I love the name. Yeah, absolutely. And the question for both of us is, are we single, married, or seeing someone? I'll answer that first. I am single. Khadija, your question now and your thoughts so far. I do have more questions, but to be honest, let's go through what has been said so far.
Okay.
So do you think it's disrespectful? Do you think it's disrespectful when someone's, being in a particular way? Do you think it's rude? And is that a red flag as well? And also the actual, viewer wants to know if you're single, married, or seeing someone.
Okay. First question is, what does it mean, first of all? What do we understand by being disrespectful? Because I believe these are relative terms and they could be perceived in different manners. You could say a word or a sentence to somebody and that could mean something funny. And you could say the same word to another person and it could be something that it could be offensive to that person. So the question here is, who are you relating to and what does disrespectful mean to you personally? And if you are able to communicate that with your spouse and if the person is able to understand your point of view and understand you better, I think you can build a healthy relationship based on that understanding and based on effective communication, which is very important. Second question is, am I single?
Yes, are you?
Yeah, I am not married at the moment presently.
You are or you're not? Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm not married at the moment.
Okay, amazing. Well, I hope that's answered some of the questions so far. I do have another comment which says that they think that it's quite subjective, to be honest. So basically, we have another comment and they're obviously saying that red flags are quite obvious to some people, but just people do choose to ignore them, which, yes, I do agree with that as well to a certain extent. They say the other comment was that that people choose to ignore red flags, and we'll go into why that could be actually, because there is obviously reasons why either it is ignored for a particular reason. And over time, if it is ignored, then it can actually ruin a relationship. And they also comment to say that they think that the best thing in a relationship is to be on the same page with most or everything, unless it is favorite food or things like that. So, okay, so Khadija, this sort of comment is to say that, the red flags are quite obvious. And at the same time, a lot of people choose to ignore them. Do you think that people choose to ignore them for a particular reason? Or do you think that they are just genuinely not aware? Or do they think that maybe in time it will get better? What's your experience when you're coaching clients and have these kinds of issues? Do you think that people ignore it deliberately? Or, is there a specific reason why people might ignore these kind of red flags? Because they do show up at the beginning.
Can you say the question? Is the question saying that why do people ignore red flags in relationships?
Yes. Is there a reason why people ignore the red flags in relationships?
Okay, we all are different people and we all have different personalities and we all come from different backgrounds and we have different beliefs and different values. So to that, I would say that we are, some people may be naive, some people may be ignorant of the fact that there are red flags in relationships. Some people are just welcoming and opening and they just may not be able to spot on the red lights or the red flags. And sometimes we are just so overwhelmed with the love and sometimes we are carried away with the perfect relationship, in quotes, perfect in quotes. And sometimes these may be reasons why people ignore the red flags in relationships. And in other times, many people have had so many failed relationships that they wouldn't just want to admit it. They would like to live in denial that, okay, this isn't happening again. Okay, I can't handle another failure. I can't handle another failed relationship. Okay, if I let it go, he's just going to go away and I'm not going to get another person. I think I'm just going to manage. And this goes on for days, months, and it's hoping that there's going to be some change in the future. And that change may not probably come in a lifetime.
That is so true. And it's interesting that you say that because from my own experience as well, talking to a lot of people that may come with issues in their relationships. And my first question is whatever problems they are actually coming to me with at the beginning. And I've always asked them, have you actually noticed this before? And almost 9 out of 10 times, they have actually noticed the problem. They have actually ignored it with whatever reason it is for them. But that is the same reason that they have now held either resentment or they even want to end the relationship. So you have to be very aware. These red flags may be really obvious and they may even be sometimes overlooked. But again, if you know yourself really well, you can assess yourself, you know your true values and your beliefs. And if it doesn't cross those boundaries, a human being can only handle so much up to a certain point. And a lot of the times people are staying in relationships for convenience or the fact that it's gone on for so long and there's children involved, so that it is quite hard for them to actually address red flags, which actually leads on to my next question. If you are already in a relationship committed and you notice the red flags, even if it was something that you ignored before or you've just noticed straight away, what do you do if you're already in a committed relationship and now these red flags are quite alarming? How would you navigate through it in a healthy way? Because we're not here to break relationships, we're here to mend them and to actually build it to be stronger. So it's not to say that, oh, we see these red flags and that's it, you're done. It's not about that. It's about you trying to have those conversations so that you can actually work through it. Because there are times where these red flags, even, over time when people grow, people evolve and they change and they are on different levels. So what would be your guidance for somebody who is noticing these red flags in a committed relationship? How would they resolve these kind of challenges, Khadija?
Thank you very much for that question, Fahima. I'd like to add that the first answer to spotting a red flag may not just be quitting the relationship. There are steps to doing it. First, you have to be able to communicate at some certain level, depending on how intense or depending on how severe the case may be. Sometimes it could be solved with communication in a relationship. Other times, you may need to bring in a professional to help you go through that, probably a life coach, a relationship coach, a counselor, a marriage counselor, and all of that. Sometimes these red flags may be threatening to your life. It may lead to abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse. And if it's as bad as that, you may be thinking of the best way out for your safety. Okay? This may be some long-term decisions that you may need to take and put yourself first. First, another thing that is very important is become self-aware. You have to be able to identify how much you can take out of that relationship. How much are you willing to what compromises are you willing to make? And if it's a no-no for you, I think you may be considering leaving that relationship if it threatens your safety or your life.
Absolutely. And while you were speaking, I do realize that a lot of people right now that may be listening can be triggered by our conversation. And we here on British Muslim TV, we do take care and we have a setup for you so that you can reach out for any support if you are triggered by anything said on tonight's show or any of the other Single Muslim Live show. And if you want to contact us, please do so on britishmuslim.tv/support. I really want to acknowledge that, even though some of the red flags are really obvious and they can be ignored, there are red flags out there that people are putting up with and it is detrimental, and we do acknowledge that and we do want to make sure that you are safe and taken care, and that's why we do provide this for you here on British Muslim TV. I just want to say that we are coming up to a short break shortly, but I do want to also advise that, Khadija, your advice is so amazing right now and I love everything that you're saying. I want to go more into some more examples because there are different levels of red flags and, what are the things that people can actually work through and what are the things that people maybe have to actually seek some further advice, like you mentioned about going to counseling or whatever, life coaching or relationship coaching, because I feel that a lot of people do come for advice and guidance when it's actually at the really detrimental stage, and then they're like, well, these kind of things don't work. It doesn't not work. It's harder to work through when you've put up and tolerated for so long. And I always advise people that we need to seek that kind of assistance, really, even at the beginning of relationships. When we talk about premarital courses, there's not enough around. Do you offer such a thing where couples come to you at the beginning stages of their, seeking to marry? And how beneficial is that? And how important is that, Khadija?
You asked me this question. First, I would like to say that a problem doesn't have to occur before you go to a life coach or a relationship counselor. First things first, when you have met somebody that you are willing to commit yourself in a lifetime relationship with, I think one of the very most important things to do is to see a premarital coach or a premarital counselor. I wrote a book, 50 Questions Before Nikah. I have some e-copies and I have some hard copies that I've sold, over 500 copies. And this will help you. This is very essential for you to start your foundation on a very strong base. It's like you're trying to build. I see that when we're trying to learn a certain course, we go to school to learn some of those courses. When we're trying to build a house, you get an architect to sketch it out for you. So when you are trying to go into a marriage that is going to last you a whole lifetime, please do get yourself a premarital coach or some form of premarital counseling that will guide you through. These are very essential because they will be guiding you throughout. You will be building your relationship on a very solid foundation.
Amazing. I love that. I love that, Khadija. That is so true. I'm sorry to interrupt you there. It's only to sort of say that what you've said is so crucial. And I want to leave on that point before we actually enter the break. And that is to say that we need to seek premarital coaching before marriage. But hopefully we'll catch you after the break so that we can go into this a lot more. See you soon.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live. With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Single Muslim Live here on British Muslim TV, sponsored by SingleMuslim.com. I'm absolutely loving the conversation so far. We've got so many tips from our guest tonight, all the way from Nigeria. We have Khadija with us, giving us all our, her top tips on these red flags and how to cope and what to do. It's absolutely amazing. And thank you so much, whoever's tuned in and who is watching and, sending all your messages. We absolutely love that. We appreciate that. We still have, the last part of the show to continue. So if you do have further queries or questions, we are here and we have Khadija just for tonight. So make sure you take advantage of her advice and her guidance today. She is definitely experienced and she knows exactly how this all works. So please do call in with any questions. The number and the WhatsApp free message is at the bottom of your screen for any sort of questions and comments that you have for us today. Khadija, as you were talking before, we do not have these life skills about marriage. We are given sort of like these lessons from our parents, and we are spoken about in relationships with regards to the rights in our faith, which is really vital. But as people evolve over time and situations change, we are also living in different testing, challenging environments, being Muslim, living in the West, and we are basically approached by so many different things that are coming towards us, and it's impacting our decision making. And we do need to take into consideration our faith, our belief. So how do you see these red flags? I mean, because the thing is, we don't want to say that, oh, if you're not this, then, that's it, we're not going to talk to you anymore. I mean, is there a way of looking at these red flags and still working through it? Or are there certain things that we just cannot overcome? And what would there be so that you know that this relationship is not for you? And this is mainly for people that are trying to enter into a relationship first, because obviously if you're already in one, then that is a different scenario. So how would you advise people that are getting to know somebody and the time they're taking to speak to somebody, that when they identify these red flags, because some of us, we just want to walk away too quickly as well. So what would be your advice and guidance for that when, you know, two people are getting to know each other in a healthy way so that they can actually navigate even through the differences?
Okay. The first thing I would like to mention is, first, you have to know yourself first. And you have to equip yourself with so much knowledge, because we've been blessed, and Islam is such a beautiful religion that it leaves nothing out. So I think it's time we sit and ask ourselves, what did Islam say about marriage? How did Islam guide us to go into marriage in a proper manner? Secondly, there are so many ways that you can get this knowledge heads on. You can read so many books. There are so many books that have been written by scholars and psychologists on guidance on how to go about marriage. Some of a few books that I may like to mention is Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And in Islam, we have so many books that will guide you. You can look at the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What advice did he give to his Sahabas, and how did he go about his marital affairs, and all of that would help you. And secondly, we are now in the 21st century. It's time that you equip yourself by knowing yourself. I think the first kind of knowledge that will be best for you is getting to know what are your values, what are those things that are acceptable to you, and learning all of those things and reframing it and using it best to equip yourself in a positive manner.
Absolutely. I love that. That is so true. We do have so much around us now. We do not have any excuse. We've got Google in our fingertips. We've got the encyclopedia. Whatever we want to, find out, we can actually find out. So we do need to be at whatever age and stage you are in life. And especially, we take time out, even if we want to go and watch a movie, we go and look at, what did the critics say? So when it comes to relationships, let's try and educate ourselves and bring ourselves to that kind of high level of education and knowledge to understand human mind and behavior. When two people are coming together, it's two people that are very different with different values and beliefs. And yes, they don't need to match perfectly, but there has to be not perfection, but potential for growth. And if both people can see it in that way and they have those kind of mindsets, it could be amazing that you can overcome so many difficulties, so many obstacles, and so many challenges, because we're all looking for that perfect person, right? Khadija, when it comes to even identifying these red flags, we're not here to say, well, you know what, you take that and you've got a cross on this and you've got a cross on that, so that, you know what, we're not going to choose you and that's it. No, we're here to say, look, if this is what we identify that doesn't sit with us right now, then let's talk about it. And as you mentioned before, when you're actually talking to a professional and you're going to seek some sort of advice, whether it's getting to know yourself and also trying to assess the other partner, what are the kind of strategies and tips that a relationship coach can actually do to help you identify this and yourself? What would you sort of sit with your client and what would you sort of tell them when they first come to you saying, look, I'm looking for marriage, I've met someone, I'm not quite sure, I don't know if it's the right person or not? How would you go through certain steps to make them, sort of sit down and evaluate this so that they can actually have something in place that they're a bit confident to move forward or not? How would you sort of address this, Khadija?
Okay, I think the first thing that is very much necessary for anyone to do is understanding yourself. You have to understand what you understand by what is marriage in the first place. Usually when we are faced with such questions, we probably know what we have learned in our homes, what we have seen, how we've seen our parents do it, what we've learned in our society and our upbringing. And then we have to also understand that we are not going to replicate the same relationship with the other person, because the other person is also coming from a different home, from probably a different environment. So we have to understand that it's not only about us. In as much as we try to understand our values, what are our personalities, I work with my clients based on a psychometric assessment that I can do to help you understand what your values is. What are you looking out for in a relationship? What kind of home do you want to build? What do you want? What are your goals for the future? What do you want to base your relationship on? What kind of a person, what kind of a personality are you, and what are you looking out for? And we also get to assess your spouse's relationship, your spouse's background, your spouse's understanding of what marriage is, what values you would like to cultivate, what kind of home you would like to have, what kind of upbringing do you like to have for your children. Because many times in relationships, this becomes problems, like what behaviors do you want to see in the partner? What can you condole or what can't you condole in a partner or in a relationship? And this helps you to talk about certain very vital issues like intimacy, like communication, like children upbringing, like if you'd like probably your spouse to be a working person, what about education, what about career goals and all of those things. These are things that we need to understand before we just jump into a relationship, because a marriage isn't only built on love. Love doesn't sustain a relationship. How far are you willing to go with that person? And what are you willing to do, or what kind of compromises are you willing to do to be with that person for a lifetime? And another very important thing that I would need to emphasize on is the issue of mental wellness. A lot of people are battling with things like anxiety, depression, and there could be some severe cases like bipolar and all of that. And sometimes this doesn't just come up and show itself up. Probably it's not just like having a broken limb or probably having a headache, and you're able to just describe all of that. When you're going into a relationship with somebody who is bipolar, you're probably not going to know that on the onset. Okay? So these are things that you need to be aware of. Another very vital issue is narcissistic people in relationships. They could be very manipulative. They could be very suppressive and all of that. And these are things that you need to be able to be aware of right from the onset, because if somebody is being able to perfectly manipulate you and probably he doesn't want you to be around your friends or your family, he wants to be around you, and you probably don't find any valuable topic that you are able to hold on to discussions with that person, probably it's time for you to begin to ask yourself, is this the life that you want for yourself? Are you always going to be around this person? And how much more can you tolerate out of all of that? Are you going to cut yourself from every relationship? Are you going to stop schooling? Is your career going to be around that person? And how much more can you take of all those relationships? And probably if you are not a narcissistic person, you are a very caring person, you are going to, it's like having enzymes breathe on that. You're going to be creating an atmosphere where he's going to be very domineering or very manipulative to you. And that breathes, that makes it breathe, that makes that behavior to breathe and even become more. And you are going to be more subjected to that relationship. So these are some vital things that you may need to. Are you an empath? That may be a valuable question that you may be wanting to ask yourself, so you do not attract a narcissistic person.
Wow, you've highlighted so many things already that, my mind is blowing with so many questions. Before we go to the break, I just want to ask you, is it important that we don't just get to know the person that we want to obviously have as a potential spouse? How important is it for us to understand even their friends and their family members? I mean, how much of that is an important factor to take into consideration? What's your thoughts on this, Khadija? When getting to know somebody, you can maybe identify or maybe miss the red flags in that person. Can you maybe see it in the people around them? Is that even a possibility?
Thank you for this very vital question, Fahima. Because one thing that you need to ask yourself is how does your spouse to be relate with the family members? How does he treat his mother, or how does she treat her father? Because most likely we are most likely going to form a kind of relationship where we've seen our parents done the same thing. Like for women or for ladies, we are most attracted to men that are like our fathers. And for men, you're most attracted to ladies that are like your mothers. So I think it's time that you begin to ask yourself, these are some certain questions that you may like to ask yourself. Like, how does he treat his mother? How does she treat her father? And sometimes some of these childhood traumas or our childhood experiences from a very basic part of our life at a very early stage. So these are things, very early learnings in our subconscious mind. So when you're mirroring the kind of person that you're going to marry, don't think that the bubbles are always going to be there for a lifetime. Like, you have to be realistic. If you are living in a home, or if you are now his wife, or you are now her husband, is she going to be treating you the same way that she treats her sisters, or the same way that he treats his mother and she treats her father? And you kind of look at the family setting. Do you see your family in all of that? It's not going to be exactly the same way, but then talking about respect and tolerance and communication and healthy communication and upbringing. Do you
And
kind
it's
of
so
mirror that in
important.
your relationship?
No, I love what you're saying so far, and we're going to go into it even more deeply in the last section. But we will be back after another break, and inshallah, I hope to hear more of your voices, your comments, and queries. And we will be asking more questions to Khadija. And please do stay tuned. I hope to see you after the break. Take care, and make sure you tune in soon.
With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live. With 3 million members searching, SingleMuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Single Muslim Live. You're watching British Muslim TV, and I'm so grateful that we've had Khadija all the way from Nigeria to share so many of her top tips and lots of conversation that's happened so far around the identification of red flags in a relationship. Khadija, when you were talking about relationships, we spoke a lot about when we are entering into it. Now, what happens when you are in a marriage for many years, and people do change over time, and if there are some of these red flags when you're in a marriage, what do you do then?
In a marriage, sometimes it's very complicated to just wake up and say you want to quit or you want a divorce, and it's a traumatic experience. But sometimes we need to sit down and address some of these issues. If you are in a very toxic relationship and you've seen all of the red flags, and it's detrimental to your life or your safety, or you feel this isn't working for you, Islam has grounds for divorce. And you may be thinking about in that direction, but I would like to also add that you should exhaust all your options. You should try to communicate with your spouse. You should try probably seeing your wali or his wali. You should try many other options and give him a chance. Definitely, they are all not perfect. There are no relationships that are perfect. You may be going through your imperfections in your relationship, but it will be a trying time for you. It will be that it may require trouble from you. It may require some level of tolerance and giving your spouse a chance to change, or a chance to realize some of those behaviors that may be affecting you. And if you have exhausted all of these options and you feel that the best option for you is quitting that relationship or quitting that marriage, because probably your mental health is at stake, or your physical well-being is at stake, the well-being of your kids may be at stake, it may be time for you to quit that marriage.
That is so true. I love what you said. It's really important as well what you highlighted about the mental well-being. As much as we do advocate to stay in relationships and do whatever you can, you do need to make sure that you are taking care of your mental well-being. And the other point that you mentioned, which is really important, is that you need to have the right people around you to support you. And I'm not saying that we need to speak to all our family members and highlight everything that's happening in your relationship, but you should have one or two people in your family that you trust who are private, that you can speak about this, because sometimes we can be blinded or blindsided by some of the things that we see and do, and these red flags may not even necessarily be a red flag. So if you talk to somebody, it can actually have and give you a better insight. And even better, if you were to actually seek that sort of advice, if you're talking to a life coach or a relationship counselor or whatever it may be, that they can actually sit with you before you even talk to your spouse, so that you can actually clear things up in your own head before you go ahead and even addressing these kinds of issues situations without being properly prepared. So yes, we do need to have that in place where we have the right support system around us when we actually see these red flags. And also be careful who you talk to about these red flags, because we might have friends who can enable it and say, well, oh, he's doing that, he didn't, or she's doing this, and just let it go and find somebody else. And you have to be very careful where you get sort of guidance from. That's why I think it's always advisable to speak to a professional, because it's non-biased, it's non-judgmental, it comes from a safe space, and at the end of the day, no one's there just taking sides because they're your friend or your family and they're just going to enable or feel sorry for you. And there's absolutely no judgment when it comes to coaching as well. So we are definitely trained professionally to actually observe these kinds of behaviors and patterns and highlight it in the best way so that you can move forward. When it comes to some final thoughts, we do have obviously about 10 minutes left, but I think in order to summarize some of the things that identifying red flags, what would you sort of advise a person that comes to you that's really concerned about, an individual that actually has so many things that are not sitting right with them? Do you think it's best to either let it go, or do you feel that they do need to take more time to assess it? How do you approach these red flags? Because a lot of us, we just kind of next very easily when it comes to relationships, even getting to know people, and we just kind of give up hope. So how do you think we can healthily approach people? And even if we identify these red flags, how can we deal with it in a much more safer, healthier, better way?
Okay, I think the first thing that is very, very important for you to take note of is that the problems are not just going to go away. If you have identified some red flags in a relationship, it is very important that you need to address it. You either need to communicate about it, or you either need to communicate with a spouse or with a professional or with a very appropriate friend or family member on what you are experiencing. As I earlier said, there are no perfect relationships. So whoever you're going to meet may have one or two reasons that maybe different from what you have initially wanted in a relationship or in your partner. And another thing that is very important to note that you should never be in a phase. Problems that are never solved before marriages are not just going to go away after marriages. You're only going to get to know the person better, and they could even be worse. So another important thing is never rush into a relationship. Sometimes we may have, I have met clients who have been faced with so many failed relationships, or they feel like marriage, their age isn't on their side. They feel pressure from family or friends to get married. And when they meet the next person, they just want to jump into that relationship or jump into that marriage. That's not going to solve the problem for you, I promise you. I have had my own fair share of it. And based on my own personal experiences, this were one of the reasons that have made me so passionate on this journey, on educating the young girls out there. And even the guys, it's not just about jumping into a marriage, okay? Many people are in the marriage and they are not happy with being there. So now that you have the chance to make your choice or make a decision, take time to make it rightly. And it's very good that you make very good investments before you jump into a marriage.
We do have a caller online. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but before we end, I'd love to take this call. Assalamu alaikum. How are you? You're live on British Muslim TV. What would you like to say?
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Hi, what would you like to say?
I wanted to say that it is important to trust a gut feeling with red flags.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't quite catch that.
It's important to trust a gut feeling.
Did you hear that, Khadija?
No, I couldn't hear you. Can you speak up a little bit louder?
I'm sorry, the connection is not that great. I really apologize, but I do really want to catch I really do apologize. Maybe you can send in a WhatsApp message or call back again. I really do apologize for not hearing. Yes, okay. I got word that he said that it is important to trust your gut feeling. I love that. That is so important. Thank you so much for calling in. Even at the last moments of the show, you've actually said something really important. Thank you so much. And that is one point I actually missed. So yeah, what is your thoughts on this, Khadija, quickly before we end when it comes to your gut instinct?
Yes, that's called an intuition. An intuition is something strongly telling you. It's a feeling that tells you that this something is about to go wrong or something you're on the right track. It's like your GPS, your internal GPS guides you. It's your way to just knowing that something is wrong or there's something just fishy. Never ignore that, because that might be leading you onto some very important or vital issues that you may need to address at any moment. Thank you.
Definitely. No, thank you so much for that call, by the way. I really appreciate that. That's an amazing point that was put out there. And I'm sorry I couldn't hear you on that properly, but I did get feedback on that. So thank you so much. It is really important that we do trust our feeling. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put that kind of intuition in us for us to actually have that extra spirituality, extra way of thinking and being and feeling. And we should definitely not ignore it. And if you do have those signs, then it's definitely something we need to address. Before we end the show, I want you to give us some final thoughts, Khadija, because you've said so many wonderful, important things. And I want to thank you so much for being here with us tonight. But before we end, I'd love to hear some of your final thoughts so that we can actually summarize some of the things that we've said and also give some closing statements before we end.
Okay, my last statement would be that if you're in a relationship and it kind of feels like you're having some red flags in that relationship, it's never too late for you to address it. There's always a moment for you to find out what you would want best for yourself and for your future. It's never too late for you to sit and address some of those feelings. First, by communicating effectively, and secondly, probably you may need to see a professional. Thank you.
Amazing. I absolutely love that. You have been an absolute pleasure here tonight. I have enjoyed every single thing that you've said, and everything that you've said resonates with everything that I know that people have been questioning and have comments about. And even prior to the show, we have got so many comments that come through. And I want to thank the viewers for tonight that's watching. I want to also thank the team behind the screens that are actually here tonight, that actually facilitate and help to serve this show and to make sure that we get everything in line for you, to make sure that we can answer your questions and your queries. Khadija, you've been an absolute gem tonight. We have had so much questions. We've had comments even on the WhatsApp messages and the Facebook. I want to say that, it's been an absolute pleasure. If anyone wants to reach you, Khadija, how can they do so? Can you give us some information about yourself right now, quickly?
Thank you, Fahima. I'm a life coach and a marriage counselor. And I was passionate about this journey because of probably a failed relationship that I had experienced in my life. And I have been through so many courses to help me to get some of this knowledge that I'm sharing with you right now. I wrote a book, 50 Questions Before Nikah and Overcoming What Limits You. These are two books that I self-authored. You can best reach me on my Instagram handle, that is at m.Khadija Ibrahim on Instagram and also Facebook. Thank you.
Amazing.
It's been a pleasure being with you this night.
No, the pleasure's all mine. Thank you so much. I just want to say that at the end of the day, we love having someone like yourself on tonight. It's so vital. It's so important that we do have episodes and shows like this addressing these kinds of topics only to serve you. We're just here to make sure that we can facilitate some of, the challenges that we are experiencing, especially in the Muslim community living in the West. And, at the end of the day, we do want to only help you through your journey being a single Muslim. I want to thank Khadija, my amazing guest tonight. I want to thank all the viewers for watching. I want to thank the caller as well as all the people that have messaged and commented on this platform. It's been an absolute pleasure from here on British Muslim TV, from the team behind that works so hard to make sure that this program goes through every single week. I want to thank you all. And inshallah, I will see you on another episode. Take care. Have a lovely evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
With 3 million members searching, singlemuslim.com proudly sponsors Single Muslim Live.